A lot of people ask me, Rory, what's that Audi E-Tron like? Is it a decent electric family car? Has it got a big boot? Is there room in there for kids? How's the range? Should I just buy a Tesla? And I always say the same thing. I don't know, never driven one. That is until recently, because Audi have just sent me this, the brand new Q8 E-Tron. And here is my definitive verdict.
What is it? Well, it's a big-ish electric SUV at the premium end of the spectrum, costing about £70,000, and is a heavily facelifted version of the original e-tron that came to market in 2018. This one, says Audi, is better looking, more efficient, has superior range, and is just more impressive in every conceivable way.
One thing that I'm not a massive fan of is the name, Q8 e-tron. Audi already make a standard petrol and plug-in hybrid version of the Q8, and that car's actually bigger than this by a couple of inches in all dimensions. So I'd struggle to call this definitively an electric alternative to those cars. Also, the Q8 had what Audi described as being quite a sporty back. This has the exact same sporty back, but Audi actually sell a Q8 e-tron Sportback with a different kind of sporty back. If you're confused, then so am I.
What's very clear is that it's a visual improvement on the previous car. It has a better looking front grille, which isn't totally smooth, a refreshing change from most electric cars. There's extra black cladding around the grille, bringing it in line with the Audi RS e-tron family, and the Audi badge is flat. The side is almost identical to the previous car, but has gorgeous new wheel designs up to 22 inches in size. Even these aero wheels look good, unusually, and there are cameras instead of mirrors on top spec models. More on these later. The back again is very similar to before with the distinctive light bar, but it does come with a new bumper design and Q8 e-tron badging.
Another reason this isn't a direct replacement for the standard petrol Q8 is the boot. It's a lot smaller. The petrol car has a 605 litre boot. This is only 528. It's actually even smaller than the previous generation e-tron. There's an okay amount of underfloor storage in there, and there's actually a 62 litre front trunk, although getting to it is a bit of a faff because there is no button on the key fob to open it directly, and also the bonnet catch is a little bit fiddly. Still, once you're in there, it's a decent place to keep your charge cables. One area where the e-tron hasn't changed that much is with the interior, but that's no bad thing because it's actually quite lovely in here. It's full of these premium materials. You got leather, you got glossy plastic, you got metal in strategic places, beautiful stitching. The whole thing feels like a premium car built by a premium brand who know what they're doing when it comes to constructing cars. Everything feels really solid as well. Nothing squeaks, nothing rattles. It's all nailed down beautifully. In terms of practicality, you've got a decent sized space down here in the center console with wireless phone charging, 2 cup holders, and also a space down here big enough for a can of your favorite coffee or drink of your choice. Apart from that, the infotainment system is pretty much what you'd expect from Audi, and that's good and bad. The good side of it is that it's easy to understand and use. You've got this separate screen down here for your climate control. It is capacitive, but it does work pretty effectively, and it vibrates every time you touch it to let you know that you've actually selected an icon. Some manufacturers get that very wrong. And the upper screen, well, it's full of the usual icons that you'd expect in a car, but it doesn't have all the extras that you might find on the latest electric models. For example, there's no games on here, there's no web browser. I mean, all those extras are a little bit unnecessary, but when you're paying this much for a car, those features are very conspicuous by their absence. Up here on the instrument binnacle, you've got the familiar Audi virtual cockpit. Does its thing really well, looks decent. Graphics and maps powered by Google. Again, it's kind of aging a bit, in my eyes anyway. I think Audi need to do something to bring that kicking and screaming into whatever century we are in at this moment. One area where they've made changes where they maybe shouldn't have done is with the door mirrors. So on the top spec 4-sprung models, which cost £90,000 to £100,000, you get these cameras instead of mirrors, which are attached to screens. Sounds like a great idea, especially for efficiency. The car can slip through the air more effectively, reducing drag, etc. But in practice, they're pretty rubbish. The screens themselves are very small, smaller than actual mirrors, and they're a bit laggy and the perspective feels a little bit off. It's a bit like playing a computer game when you're driving the car. Also, you've had decades of training to look in your peripheral vision for a mirror, but instead you've got to look to the left and down. And when you do that, you can't use your other peripheral vision to see ahead of you. So I've lost count of the number of times that I've actually nearly crashed this car by using these mirrors. One other thing I'm going to have a moan about is the blind spot recognition system. On most cars, you get a light which flashes in your periphery to let you know that you might be crashing into something on your left or right hand side. These, they don't have a light. Instead, you get this rubbish little yellow icon on the screen to say that you might be hitting something, and that is frankly not good enough. Don't buy it.
In the back, there's loads of space, enough for 3 passengers with good leg and headroom despite a big sunroof. As usual, you get a fold-down armrest that houses extra storage as well as cup holders. On the center consoles in front of rear passengers, there are 2 USB-C ports and a pretty easy-to-use panel for controlling the climate in the back. There are 2 battery options in the Q8 E-Tron, the 50 and 55. The 50 uses an 89 kWh net or 95 kWh gross battery pack, while the 55 uses an even larger 106 kWh battery pack or 114 kWh gross. The former delivers 290 miles, while the latter manages 343.
The amount of power you get depends on the version of the car you go for. So the 55 has 407 horsepower and will do 0 to 62 in around 5.5 seconds. The 50 is a bit slower. It has 340 horsepower and will do 0 to 62 in around 6 seconds. Incidentally, when I first got this car, I jumped in and went for a blast, floored it, and I thought instantly, oh yeah, this has to be the slower one, definitely. But then I looked at the specs and it turned out it's the 55. It just feels really slow. What is impressive is the everyday driving experience in this car. It's plush, it's quiet, it's refined. It's a lovely thing to drive. Right, let me break that down for you. The suspension is soft, it's plush, it flows over the road really well. The car's quite heavy, so when you end up in a big pothole, you really feel that kind of thud as you go into it. But apart from that, it really soaks up the imperfections in the road really well. A lot better than many electric cars, in fact. And then there's the quietness, exceptionally quiet in this car. There's a lot of things that work in your favor to help with that. So you've got double glazed windows, double glazed windscreen, textile materials lining the wheel arches. All the mats have a foam backing to soak up extra noise. And it's just super quiet. I mean, even the motors live in an acoustic box to minimize that whirring noise that you'd get. And I know I slated them earlier on, but these stupid wing camera things, yeah, I don't like them, but they are good for one thing, minimizing wind noise on the move. I still wouldn't have them, but they do help with quietness. The brakes are okay as well. They're a little bit too sharp at the top end and they don't allow you to stop perfectly smoothly at extremely low speeds. But there's a bigger issue that I'll find with the brakes, and that is they don't allow for one pedal driving. When you lift off the accelerator, the thing just coasts along like a normal car in, say, 5th or 6th gear. There's very little engine braking. I guess the reason for that is that Audi wanted this to feel like a normal car, which they've achieved. But there are people out there who do prefer that one pedal driving experience, and this doesn't have it.
Audi promises this car will get 343 miles on a full charge, but in reality, that's unlikely. I managed anywhere between 1.5 and 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour in my time with it, which means you can expect between 159 and 265, and that's in fairly warm weather. In winter, expect those figures to drop. The E-Tron 50 will recharge at 150 kilowatts and the 55 at 170 kilowatts. So the 50 will go from 10% to 80% in 28 minutes, while the 55 will do the same in 31 minutes.
On the subject of range and recharging, this car does a pretty good job of helping you get to where you need to be. So for example, let me use the voice navigation system to go somewhere. Navigate to Newcastle. So that's obviously miles away. It's going to find something.
Please now say additional search terms or select.
Okay, so I'll choose Newcastle and then the car will start route guidance. But then it will know I can't make it to Newcastle.
Turn right.
So it goes, I don't have enough battery to go there. Do you want to stop off at charging stations? And I say, okay. And then the car will calculate what charging stations to stop at and for how long. So look at this. It reckons that I need to stop at Ionity in Peterborough for 41 minutes and then top up from 17%. And when I get to Newcastle, I have 12%. That is very useful and very, very clever. Notice as well, on the driver display, it gives you a bubble to show you your maximum range. That is a feature stolen.
Please turn right after 300 yards at the end of the road and continue to follow the B560 towards Kempston.
That's a feature stolen straight off the Nissan Leaf, but I'll allow it. Okay, so what if you've had enough of efficiency and you want to have some fun in your Q8 E-Tron? Well, it actually handles fairly well. According to Audi, it's got a 45% stiffer torsional rigidity, which does help handling, and it is more impressive than the likes of the Mercedes EQC, for example. But it's still heavy. The thing weighs 2.5 tons, which I calculated to be about 1 grand piano more than a Lamborghini Urus. Quite a sobering thought, isn't it? A Urus pulling along a grand piano. That's the equivalent of this. Also, fun fact, this car can tow 1,800 kilograms, which is about 4 and a bit grand pianos. One of the things I like about driving the Q8 E-Tron is that everything at your fingertips feels really sturdy and substantial and expensive. And that goes for the steering wheel, which isn't heavy, but just feels nice and plush. The weight of the accelerator, even the feel of the indicators, everything is premium. So what is my official verdict on the Q8 E-Tron? Well, let's do pros and cons, shall we? Pros, looks really nice, very luxurious, and very pleasant to drive. Cons, not very efficient, quite expensive, and a little bit underwhelming when it comes to performance, I'd say. There's also the fact that it doesn't really push the boundaries as far as I'd like. It feels like quite a safe, sensible car that doesn't do anything to stand out. There's a ton of rivals out there that have quirky features that are really interesting. Netflix, web browsers, games, HEPA filters, hyperscreens. This has none of that. Is it a bit too sensible? Maybe not, if that's what you're looking for, but in a world where electric cars are all pretty similar to drive, I think the biggest challenge is going to be for manufacturers to find ways of making their cars stand out. And I'm not sure the E-Tron does a good enough job of that. However, if you're the kind of person that doesn't want to stand out, that just wants quality, well, maybe this car's for you.